Hello and welcome to the... I was wondering if we go something a bit more edgy. Hello and welcome to the Nightmare Vaults, yeah. God, that would be funny if we were doing some fake nice creepypasta. It's alive!
Yeah. That'd be funny.
We'll say, let's try a more subtle voice.
Yes.
Hello and welcome to the Nightmare Vault. Fucking nailed it.
We need maybe like a little stinger or something.
Shake hands with danger.
Yeah. We can talk about that maybe later because, it'd be fun. But anyway, on to
today's episode after fucking about trying to do a new intro about, 11 episodes in?
Yeah.
And today, by executive committee decision, we are doing Gateway of the Mind.
Yes.
Although, I'm not sure how we have a committee. It's just two people in the basement.
Yeah. I guess the very small committee. Unless we also count the cockroaches.
Oh, yeah. That one there's Philip, and that one there's Brad. And where's Clifford? He must be on holiday.
I guess so.
Clifford the big red roach.
Yeah. God.
Couldn't help myself. I think I mentioned what we're doing today, and that's covering Gateway of the Mind. Which, again, it's another old one, but it's pretty good. Originally, being uploaded to the CreepyPasta website on August 9th, 2010, which is not really, it gives us a good idea of its origin date, but with a lot of creepypastas, they tend to circulate a bit before ending up on the CreepyPasta website.
Yes, they definitely do.
So it probably would have been around a bit earlier than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, this one's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's a nice short one for once.
Yes, for once.
Watch me just spend 2 hours trying to record it because I keep cucking up.
It happens. So again, this is one, I have no info on, never read before. You definitely have, but has been some time.
Oh, yeah, actually. I guess it's relatively more recent than, let's say, Dead Bar.
Okay, yeah.
But again, that's still like ages ago.
Yeah. So what can you remember, I guess, being the most standout part?
I just find this one, back when I was younger, quite interesting and still kind of do.
Cool.
Although that's going off memory, so I'm not sure how reliable that is. We'll find out by the time we get to the end of this bad boy.
Yeah, we'll see if it stands up to your memory. And I guess original author unknown.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the case with a lot of them.
Yes.
Although, sure. I think it's actually better that way, honestly.
Yeah, adds to the mystique and mystery of it all.
Although, before we ended up recording this, we did have a bit of debate on what we're going to do, and Harbinger Experiment may or may not be coming up in the near future.
Yeah. Yeah, no promises, but it's a work in progress, let's say.
Yeah, not only that, but also other ones that, I guess I brought up last episode that are more likely to come before that would be probably a double feature of both Eyeless and Laughing Jack.
Yeah.
Because they're both short, and I thought instead of doing 2 short videos, do 1 longer video.
Yeah, why not?
Well, look at what we did with Lavender Town.
Yeah.
We basically spent more time talking about the story than actually, reading it.
Yes, we did.
Actually, I think this tangent's going on longer than, the story's going to be. So I guess we shouldn't bore our audience to death, and let's get into it. In 1983, a team of deeply pious scientists conducted a radical experiment at an undisclosed facility. The scientists had theorized that a human without access to any senses or ways to perceive stimuli would be able to perceive the presence of God. They believed that the 5 senses clouded our awareness of eternity, and without them, a human could actually establish contact with God by thought. An elderly man who have claimed to have nothing left to live for was the only test subject to volunteer. To purge him of all his senses, the scientist performed a complex operation in which every sensory nerve connection to the brain was surgically severed. Although the test subject retained full muscular function, he could not see, hear, taste, smell, nor feel. With no possible way to communicate with or even sense the outside world, he was alone with his thoughts. Scientists monitored him as he spoke aloud about his state of mind in jumbled, slurred sentences that he couldn't even hear. After 4 days, the man claimed to be hearing hushed, unintelligible voices in his head. Assuming it was an onset of psychosis, the scientist paid little attention to his concerns. 2 days later, the man cried that he could hear his dead wife speaking with him, and even more, he could communicate back. The scientists were intrigued, but not convinced, until the subject started naming their dead relatives. He repeated personal information to them that only their dead spouses and parents would have known. At this point, a sizable portion of the scientists left the study. After a week of conversing with the deceased throughout his thoughts, the subject became distressed, saying the voices were overwhelming. Apparently, in every waking moment, his consciousness was being bombarded by hundreds of voices that refused to leave him alone. He frequently threw himself against the wall, trying to elicit a pain response, and begged the scientist for sedatives so he could escape the voices by sleeping. This tactic worked for 3 days until he started having severe night terrors. He repeatedly said that he could see and hear the deceased in his dreams. Only a day later, the subject began to scream and claw at his non-functional eyes, hoping to sense something in the physical world. Now hysterical, his voice said that the voices of the dead were deafening and hostile, speaking of hell and the end of the world. At one point, he yelled, "No heaven, no forgiveness!" For 5 hours straight. He continually begged to be killed, but the scientists were convinced that he was close to establishing contact with God. After another day, the subject could no longer form coherent sentences. Seemingly mad, he started to bite off chunks of flesh from his arm. The scientists rushed into the test chamber and restrained him to a table so he could not kill himself. After a few hours of being tied down, the subject halted his struggling and screaming. He stared blankly at the ceiling as teardrops silently streaked across his face. For 2 weeks, he had to be manually rehydrated due to the constant crying. Eventually, he turned his head and, despite his blindness, made focused eye contact with a scientist for the first time in the study. He whispered, "I have spoken with God, and he has abandoned us." And then his vital signs stopped. There was no apparent cause of death. There we go. Okay, I'm going to admit I got a little bit more creative than I normally do, but I tend to get a bit creative doing some of the stories just to give them a bit more life.
Yeah.
But I think that's more because I'm not a fan of my voice, even though I kind of like hearing it, but at the same time hate hearing it.
Yeah. Takes a while to get used to hearing your own voice.
So, well, we'll start with your thoughts on it.
Sure. It's interesting because as it started sort of going through the story, it started to bring up, for me, sort of similarities there's a TV show that's based on a book, and it's not coming to me. I'll have a look for it in a moment. Where, yeah, sort of like right at the end in the final season, they start doing very similar tests where, yeah, they're trying to basically contact God in some form or fashion. And
I'm not surprised considering, this is kind of an idea that I think a lot of people have played around with.
Yeah. So I actually want to double check of when this came out, if it was around the same time, if it was before or after.
It would have to be similar-ish time.
Yeah.
Well, I guess while you're doing that, I'll give my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
I think it actually still holds up quite well because I kind of like how it's not like overt in-your-face horror. It's just that kind of subtle.
Yes. I guess, yeah, what we've seen in, what one was it? There was a similar thing. What was the one with the test group of people in the test?
The Russian sleep experiment.
That's it. Yeah. This is, yeah, similar, but that one was much more horrific. You know, there's a moment of that in here where, yeah, he sort of starts gnawing at his own arm, but yeah, nowhere near as intense as the Russian sleep experiment.
Not only that, but not as much narrative whiplash.
Yes.
Which is something I do kind of criticize.
Yeah.
Although I use that word lightly with the Russian sleep experiment, that it can be a bit jarring.
Yeah.
To go from like a period of peace to just balls to the wall in like 3 seconds flat.
Yes.
In some places.
Yeah.
But I think overall still a pretty good story. Hell, I think I was actually, if I remember correctly, rated it quite highly, both as a creepypasta, but also as, well, a personal favorite of mine.
Yes. Because, yeah, I think when we covered that one, that was something that was definitely brought up, and how, like, you could have just had, yeah, small bridging moments so it wasn't jumping around so much of, like, a little bit of dialogue between the scientists and that sort of thing. Where, yeah, this one is much more concise. It doesn't feel like it's, you know, sort of meandering around, yeah, sort of trying to add in too much horror, or it gives us, yeah, a good sense of the test subject as well. Even though it's like still very brief, it's, yeah, it gives us a little bit more of a human touch. Whereas, yeah, I guess comparatively to the Russian sleep experiment, you know, it was just, there was less of that emotional sort of feeling where, yeah, we get quite
One
a good
thing
bit
I
here.
do like about it is that it does feels quite clinical.
Yes. And I think that sort of helps as well.
Well, after all, this is from the scientist's perspective.
Yeah. Whereas I guess, yeah, it's not really quite clear when it comes to the Russian sleep experiment of, like, if it was how it's framed, yeah, from if it was someone reading, like, yeah, the medical report or journalist sort of covering the story.
Although I did take a bit more creative liberty with some of the wording, but I felt like it just added to the story.
Yeah. I think, yeah, there was only 2, maybe 3 moments where, yeah, just sort of like adding another word in to help the sentence
Flow.
Or yeah, like there was one here with the...
Yeah, I swapped or out for nor.
Yeah, which I thought...
Nor feel.
Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense to have nor. Like, it makes more sense to have nor instead of or. And it's such a small change, but I think it adds quite a little extra bit of depth. So, yeah, a very important, I think, sentence as well. Because, yeah, it really gives you that clear picture, like, this person, yeah, has nothing, no senses at all, which is, yeah,
I was about to say, where's the other instance we changed? I think it's a little further down.
Yeah, there was, I think you added in a then or that or something.
I think it was them. Oh, yeah, and them, his vital signs stopped.
Yeah, instead of and his vital signs stopped. It's like, that one's probably more important, to be completely honest, to add in, yeah, and then his vital signs stopped.
Which I might have...
Yeah.
Did I say something? I might have just said his vitals stopped. Might have taken signs out. I'm not sure.
I think you said signs.
Well, I guess we're all back to that section. And his vital signs stopped.
Yeah, I think as well, you know, the fact that it throws in, like, he's an older gentleman. We don't know that he had a wife or a family or anything like that until we get told that he's now be able to speak to his wife. So that was like a pretty interesting moment. I was like, oh, yeah, a really, really interesting way of doing it. But then the fact that it brings up, like, he's now hearing the voices of dead relatives of the scientists as well. That was
Yeah, and that's when people are like, fuck this shit, I'm out.
yeah, which that was overall, a really good one. This is, really, really top tier. And for such a short story as well.
I think it does a lot in a very short time
It does.
and doesn't feel too congested.
Yes. Yeah. Really, really good. I would say the only weird bit is probably this little, sort of like follow-up study section, which I think it's, for me, it's not the fact that there is the follow-up study, but just the way that it's worded, because, so much of the actual story itself was worded quite well.
I wonder if it's an after thing.
Yeah, and flowed quite well. Whereas once it gets to there, it gets a bit clunky, the way it, lists off all the percentages and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's more like lore stuff rather than to do with the actual story. So that was the only sort of letdown for me, was really just that last chunk.
Well, actually, we may end up cutting that bit out. Kind of makes sense. I wonder if that's just a follow-up tacked on in the end there against a second half, because it does feel a bit jarring.
Yeah. So I guess, it sort of leaves the question as like, was that, originally in the original, which obviously, like this says here, the original was 2010, but was this an addendum? Why was it added in? I think, like, I do like that the fact that it does say continuing study in San Francisco, California, 2003 to present. So it sort of leaves it open and adds that, sort of little spookiness or urban legend sort of thing right at the end, which is, I think that's a nice touch. But it's just like the wordiness. I guess just going back to my point, so the TV series that I was thinking of is called The Leftovers. And just having a quick look here, the book was released in 2011, but the book itself doesn't actually get up to the TV show continues on the story. So if anyone has copied this sort of idea, it would be the writers of the TV show. Because once it gets, I think, to the third season, they start looking into how to contact God. Because the whole idea of the story is that there's like this rapture event, and certain people are taken from Earth, and they're trying to figure out why the people were left. But
although
some similarities.
I think there's actually a bit of footage associated with this story.
Oh, okay.
And it's actually quite an interesting story because it was a bit mysterious, the origin of the footage in that. I'm not sure if it's on the CreepyPasta site or not.
Right.
Or it may be attached to one of the relevant wikis, but I think it was some kind of art thing, I believe.
Oh, okay.
By some French fella, and I guess that just now becomes associated with this creepypasta. Which was pretty cool. And I'm thinking we may actually see if we can find that footage. Well, I guess we should get back to...
Yes.
Talking about the story, even though all this is going to get cut out anyway.
Yeah.
So where were we? Oh, talking kind of about the origins of the footage. That's how we got off tangent.
Yeah.
But it's quite interesting. I can't remember the full story, but it was just, again, it's interesting how this art project ended up getting turned into, like, I wouldn't say an iconic creepypasta, but quite a well-known creepypasta, and I think it's more associated with the creepypasta than whatever it was originally intended for, but I think that's just a lot of things.
Yeah. I guess so,
That's actually kind of one of the big things of creepypastas is repurposing stuff.
Yeah. And I guess the one of the good things about the internet is that, the way things can live on through different means in which they were created. So, really interesting. And how that can be influenced in creating other things as well.
I feel like, I'm not sure how much this flew under the radar, but I feel like those that were around back in the day would know it, but I think for a lot of the newer creepypasta fans, they probably haven't heard of this one.
Yeah, for sure.
Them, again, I'm not sure what the kids are familiar with. Like,
yes.
I know about the big ones. Those are definitely going to be known by the newer generations, like Jeff the Killer, Smile Dog, and the sorts. But I feel like the Gateway of the Mind would probably be one of the sleepers of the bigger hits, just because I don't think it has the similar creepy factors the other ones had.
Yeah. It doesn't stand out in that way, which I think a lot of the other bigger ones, they stand out because there is a lot of creepiness and more sort of like horror elements, where this is more drama, I guess, with some horror. There's a bit of thriller element, I guess. And then, of course, the religious aspect of it as well.
one that I would compare this to, even though they're a bit different, would be Arizona.
Okay.
Like, they're similar-ish,
Mm.
but, well, I say that, but I think there's going to be a few people like, no, they're kind of completely different.
Okay.
But, again, it's similar vibe, I guess.
Right. Okay.
Although, I think it's funny, I think Arizona is an old classic, and it's only recently that I got around to hearing it for the first time.
Oh, okay.
And actually, I've heard it quite a few times recently anyway, just because it's like, oh, this is an interesting story, and I tend to kind of listen to it, a new story repeatedly, just because I like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't notice that before, and be like, oh, that's neat.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, you always find little bits and pieces on re-listens.
Or even rereads.
Yeah. I think the only little thing that I have to add before we get to the rating is that I recently finished a book called Perfume, where it's about this guy who is born without any scent. And because of that, he has this like amazing sense of smell. And he ends up sort of becoming like revered as a god. So like in this instance here with Gateway of the Mind, it's like removing all senses to contact God, where it's sort of like the enhancement of a sense and removal of one could make you a god. But yeah, I don't know if that's just anecdotal or just something that came to
Although,
me.
one way I do interpret it is that by cutting off all 5 senses completely, he's able to fully access like a 6th sense, so to speak.
Ah, yeah, okay.
That's kind of one way I see it.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah. You're able to focus because, all the other senses are sort of clouding that one sort of hidden sense. That's a cool way of looking at it.
Although, I guess let's move on to ratings. I guess you can go first.
Yeah, this one's really good. So out of 10, I'm going to give it a really solid 8.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was going to, I might as well give my personal score. I'd give it a 9.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a bit of a sleeper in that, and just kind of just the low-key nature of it just makes it kind of stand out from the others.
Yeah.
Not only that, but you can see that besides maybe just a few wordings that, well, a few words that I added in just to give it flow better.
Yeah.
Grammar-wise, it's solid.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think that alone already deserves it an extra point.
Yeah. That's fair.
Although as a creepypasta, that's going to be a hard one to rate because I would like to give it kind of a high praise, but then I feel like it's not like the other creepypastas, so it's very hard to gauge it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. As a story itself, it's very
solid.
good. But yeah, as a creepypasta, what is iconic about creepypastas, it definitely lacks a little bit.
I think even though I would like to give it an 8, I think as a creepypasta it has to get a 7 just because it's really good, but it just kind of lacks what high-ranking creepypastas would have, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Or your typical good creepypasta.
Yeah.
And if it had more of those elements, it probably would hurt the story, but then...
Yeah, it's that interesting
It's the
balancing act.
catch-22.
Yeah. It wouldn't be what it is if it went more creepypasta-esque, but yeah, it doesn't quite stand up to the more iconic ones because it doesn't.
Yeah, and it's more just kind of comparing what... I was about to say apples to oranges, but these are...
Sort of. Interesting.
I guess if it was kind of... If creepypastas were more similar to it in that low-key nature, I think it would probably rank much higher. But then I feel like it would also get pushed back anyway because then it's the norm. So it's it's very hard to kind of get like a rating as a creepypasta in my opinion because you have to take in consideration how does it stack up to your average creepypasta? Does it have the same feel and vibe? And then does those elements well?
Yes.
And then so as you stray away from kind of the norm, that knocks you down. But then again, if you stick with the norm but don't have a great execution, again, knocks you down.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a bit of my thought process into why I give it a 7.
Yeah.
Just considering what it is, that's actually pretty good.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, that would probably still put it in the top 1%, given the fact that there is so many stories out there now available on the official website. So, yeah, even if rating something a 7, that's still pretty high up there. All right. Well, I think that pretty much does us for this one.
Yeah, actually, I think we've spent more time talking about it than actually reading it.
I guess let us know, what are your guys' thoughts of Gateway of the Mind?
Not only that, but what would you like to see next?
Yeah, which it will be my pick next. I think I already know what I want to do, but what I would like to ask is, are there any other sort of sleeper stories in the same vein as Gateway of the Mind? Because if there is, I'm definitely interested in those as well. So let me know. Give me some suggestions in the comments. If not, I think I'm probably going to do the theatre sequel. Just
I forgot about that.
I want to see how bad it really is compared to the original, because that seems to be the consensus, is that it doesn't really stand up.
Well, obviously it doesn't stand up very well because I can't remember it. Although I think, wasn't it more recent though?
I think so, yeah. So
It may have came out at a time where I kind of dropped off.
yeah, it may have. So
Because I know it was around back in the early days, but I was going to say it was that incident, but no, I think I left a bit after that incident. People will know what I'm talking about.
Right.
The OGs will know.
Okay.
Actually, even some of the non-OGs would probably know because, well, it made news headlines.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I guess, with that out of the way, also let us know where Gateway of the Mind ranks for you. Let us know your out of 10 rating, what you would give us. And I guess catch us in the next one.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see you there. Well, unless something happens to us in this dark and damp basement.
Very spooky.